بنفوسنا بالقاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. If we look around us, we don't need to think much, but that we find that the world of the 21st century has become a very turbulent world. It is not easy for us to find peace, conflicts, protests, struggles, natural disasters, human tragedies are widespread and growing fast around the world. Particularly after the global financial crisis in 2007, we are living in a state of fear and instability. It may be passive at times, but at times it is more acute. We've just begun recovering from the devastating impact of COVID and now face economic, social, and geopolitical challenges. While tomorrow feels very uncertain for many of us, in this environment where external peace is difficult to find, the only domain seeming to be available is the inner domain. A person's inner feeling towards life, like contentment, patience, and thankfulness, are crucial for dealing with the outside world. Although personal afflictions and challenges are hard to bear for one affected, yet they are not as crushing, bewildering, and frightening as those which affect a whole community. When an individual is afflicted by hardship, what do? We seek help of others, friends, family, in their wisdom, determination, and steadiness. But when difficulties are faced by a whole community, it stuns the community, numbs them, clouds their vision, as if the collective has lost its wisdom. It not only disrupts the individual, but also the collective life. If we observe closely in the scheme of creation, every animate being that comes into existence develops and grows through struggle and adversity, from the very first day of its life till the end. This is a law of nature that rules over all beings, and particularly the human being. Adversity is an existential component of life. It is indivisible from life. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ. Verily we have created man into toil and hardship. Kabad here, Mufassirin say, mean pain, distress, hardship, toil, trial. Death, sickness, fear, hunger, grief, poverty, deprivation are but a few of examples of things. This world and life are a chain of never-ending changes and transformations. فَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَحْوِيلًا. And you shall not find any alteration in the course of Allah, and you shall not find any change in the course of Allah. This is the course that has been laid down. Of course, these are in gradation, and we must never ever trivialize or make small anybody's challenges. We see that the Quran speaks of test and trial, which we relate to as tribulations and difficulties, and people in the past being severely shaken and tested. And the Quran reads, do you think you will be admitted into paradise without being tested like those before you? They were afflicted with suffering and adversity and were so violently shaken that even the messenger and the believers with him cried out, Mata Nasrullah. When will Allah's help come? Ala inna nasrallahi qareeb. The response comes, indeed Allah's help is always near. As for the divine purpose behind testing mankind and why God tests humankind, it's a large area of discussion, and I am trying to understand it better myself, and it's beyond the scope of today's khutbah. However, briefly touching upon it, according to the thoughts of Allama Tabatabai, he points out two ways. One is God's purpose in testing mankind, and in the language of the common man, in this approach, God reveals himself as the absolute king with sovereignty, declaring that all are his slaves. When speaking in this language, the world is portrayed as a preparatory stage for the next world. His slave must comply with his commands, for which they will be rewarded in the hereafter. In this approach, the life of this world is a test, a trial, in which God himself is the examiner. And you've heard this verse, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ وَلَنَبْلُوكُمْ بِشَرٍّ وَخَيْرٍ fitna. Every soul shall taste death, and we will bring upon you good and ill by way of trial. The second approach is an intellectual one, based on the true knowledge of the world. In this approach, and pay attention to this, creation with all of its good and evil is viewed as a painting that has ugly scenes as well as beautiful scenes. From this point of view, test is meaningless. There is, however, one fundamental point that should be heeded. The spots in this painting of ink act on their own accord, as if they are painting themselves. They have been placed on the canvas in such a way that allows them some freedom. They use this freedom to create pleasant and beautiful scenes, or they may use it to create unpleasant ones as well. The drawings that they create will determine what future awaits them. We are those spots of ink on this canvas. As for facing adversities and trials in some ways, shapes or forms, there is no helping it or a way out of it. How aptly we find in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. And we will surely test you with something of fear, hunger, and loss of property, lives and fruits, but give glad tidings to the steadfast ones. It continues, who when a calamity befalls them, say, verily we belong to Allah, and certainly unto Him shall we return. And it continues, أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَيْهِمْ صَلَوَاتٌ مِّن رَبِّهِمْ وَرَحْمَةٌ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُهْتَدُونَ. Those are they on whom are blessings and mercy from their Lord. Allah Akbar. And they are the ones that are guided right. Although it may have been referring to the community during the time of the Prophet who were tested severely in relation to jihad, we can draw lessons from these verses as well. We see that passing through these adversities and trials, there is a greater outcome and a higher state of existence. They are they on whom blessings and mercy is from their God, from their Lord, and they are the ones that are rightly guided. Commentators have talked about the meaning of salawat, which means forgiveness. Others have said it to mean praise, and others have said it to mean abundant mercy, which is not ceasing. We can see here that there is actually a connection between adversity, pain, and constructive growth and refinement of the human being. By choosing a course, the human being actualizes the potential that lies dormant within himself, and either proves himself to be praiseworthy or blameworthy. There are references to this in the Quran other than the verse that we have mentioned, which says, we have adorned the earth with attractive things. لِنَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّهُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, so that we may test people to find out which of them do best. In this way, we see that trials and difficulties and challenges are actually meant for us. For God already knows. It is for us to get a deep insight and a recognition of ourselves. We find how aptly this is related by Imam Ali alayhi salam, who says, في تقلب الأحوال علم جواهر الرجال. It is in the extreme circumstances that a man's true metal shows itself. And again, by Imam Rida alayhi salam, who said, people are tested as gold is tested, and they are purified as gold is purified. The word fitna refers to the process of smelting gold ore. It is melted so that its impurities float to the surface and are removed so that nothing but the pure gold remains. Tests and trials are thus considered a means for perfection of the human being. We also find in contemporary research, there is an initiative done by the University of Pennsylvania, which is called the Growth Initiative. It is a program that aims to better understand the conditions under which people can experience positive behavioral change after going through highly stressful and adverse events. They intend to uncover the scope of this growth and the factors that limit growth. There is a claim by Nietzsche which says that what does not kill me makes me stronger. It has great intuitive appeal, and many believe that experiencing hardship and troubles can leave them in a better place than they were before. Psychological scientists have become increasingly interested in studying the positive changes that people report in the aftermath of highly stressful life events. This notion has been referred to with many different names, such as adversarial growth, post-traumatic growth, stress-related growth. Of course, there is also another spectrum of it, which is, people find it very, very difficult. But I want to present that there is an alternative to this as well. Adversity can be the fuel of greatness. It's one of the most powerful forces in life. It can bring out one's best or worst. Ultimately, it is how we deal with it and the support we have around us. Will they be roadblocks or springboards? Will it turn me bitter or will it accelerate me? The most common response in all walks of life is to try and make it go away. The reality is that when we take away adversity, we also take away one of the most important ingredients to growth. It plays a vital role in growth and greatness. In simple terms, no adversity, no growth. We need to try and think about it differently and possibly even try and embrace it. We may not like it, we may not enjoy it, but we have to believe and understand that it plays a role it plays in turning the storm into a source of energy. It is the learning that comes from the adversity that creates the opportunity for growth. And there is a very nice quote by Robert Gary Lee, which I found touching. And he said, wisdom is nothing more than healed pain. Wisdom is nothing more than healed pain. And this is masterfully captured by a saying attributed to Rumi. And the poem reads, I said, what about my eyes? He said, keep them on the road. I said, what about my passion? He said, keep it burning. I said, what about my heart? He said, tell me what you hold inside it. I said, pain and sorrow. He said, stay with it. The wound is the place where the light enters you. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul huwa Allahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala ala baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So how do we go about dealing with these trials, tribulations, challenges, difficulties, storms? One of the most important things, of course, while being in turmoil, is not to distance oneself from God and remember to supplicate God. It is a very vivid and striking verse in the Quran which reads, قُلْ مَا يَعْبَعُ بِرَبِّكُمْ بِكُمْ رَبِّي لَوْلَا دُعَاؤُكُمْ. Say, my Lord would not concern himself with you. Just listen to this. My Lord would not concern himself with you had it not been for your supplication. And the Prophet said in a well-known hadith, Ad-du'a mukhul ibadah. Supplication is the essence of worship. How do you define worship? Is it prayers, fasting, khums, zakat? Mukh means the bone marrow, the innermost, the core. And he said supplication is the essence of worship. He also said, make yourself known to Allah during ease, He will know you in adversity. And Imam Ali similarly says, know that those who are conscious of Allah will find through Him a way out of the troubles of trials and a light from darkness. And this is strikingly again reflected in this verse, which we are all familiar with. Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu yukhrijuhum min adh-dhulumati ila an-nur. Allah is the protecting friend of those who believe. He brings them out of darkness into light. So it is possible for a believer to be in the state of darkness. Darkness can have many, many, many meanings. Physical, spiritual, internal, personal, mental, psychological. But the verse says He is the protecting friend that takes them out of the darkness into the light. All the prophets, peace be upon them, as we find in the Quran, resorted to supplications as their ultimate weapon. And we have a hadith that speak of dua being the weapon of the believer, by which you face these adversities, to help with their efforts when they would fail in reforming their nations and their hostile environments. Our near constant state of challenges display us being in the utter state of need and existential poverty, which we have talked about, faqr, that we take recourse to supplication and always remain hopeful for a good outcome. Human affairs are said to be of three types. One type which is willed by Allah without the need for supplication. Whether I supplicate or not, this thing is going to come to pass. The other is which will not be willed by Allah, regardless of whether or not the individual supplicates. Whether I supplicate or not, this is not going to happen. And the third type is, if the person or the beneficiary supplicates, then it will happen. Without which the thing will not come to pass. As Allama Iqbal in some place I've heard has quoted, that dua or supplication is that thing which brings a thing from the realm of potentiality to the realm of actuality. How did the Prophet respond to pressure and stress? And there are so many examples that you can look at. But I want to just share with you one. Prior to the Battle of Badr, 313 Muslims, as you know, were en route to intercept an unarmed caravan when the Prophet found out that 1,000-strong army, armed to the tilt, were waiting to pounce. The moment was extremely tense. The Muslims were very lightly armed, unequipped for war, outnumbered 3-1. As soon as the Prophet returned to the camp, he prayed to Allah in solitude. He then gathered the companions and asked, "What do you think we should do?" This was his methodology. First, supplicating to Allah and then doing shuhra. As the armies approached, the stage was set for the battle the following morning. The Prophet spends the whole night awake, immersed in supplication, prolonging his prostration. He said, "O Allah, if you destroy this group," meaning the Muslims, "you will not be worshipped on this earth." Allahu Akbar. In other words, failure here will mark the end of Islam as it was known on earth. The stakes were never higher. And the Prophet relied on what? His supplication, he repeated, "O Allah, your help that has been promised. O Allah, your help that has been promised. O Allah, your help that has been promised." Ibn Mas'ud relates, "I have never seen anyone pleading more than when I saw the Prophet plead to Allah on the night of Badr. He lifted his arms into the sky and made dua, an action reserved for the most desperate of prayers and requests." Ali ibn Abi Talib says, "If you saw us on the night of Badr, you would have seen every single one of us asleep, except for the Prophet who was praying behind a tree until the morning." Moments before the battle began, the Prophet once again turned to his Lord, raising his hands towards the sky, saying, "O Allah, fulfill your promise to me. O Allah, give me what you have promised. O Allah, if this group is destroyed, you will not be worshipped on earth." The Prophet continued to ask Allah and continued to raise his hands towards the sky, even so much so that his upper garment, they say, fell off him. The prophetic methodology is to combine unwavering reliance and turning to Allah with putting in the effort with one's own hands. As again Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi alayhi says, the Prophet was the closest to the enemy, fighting most determinedly. And when fighting grew fierce, we would seek protection through him. Research that has been done on prayer shows that it may have similar benefits to meditation. It can calm your nervous system, shutting down the flight or flight response. It can make us less reactive to negative emotions and become less angry. In 2005, a study was done and reported in the Journal of Behavioral Medicine, comparing secular and spiritual forms of meditation, found that spiritual meditation was more calming. In secular meditation, you focus on something such as your breath or a non-spiritual word. In spiritual meditation, you focus on a spiritual word or text. So participants were divided into groups, some being taught how to meditate using words of self-affirmation such as, I am love. And others taught how to meditate with words that described a higher power such as, God is love. They meditated for 20 minutes a day for 4 weeks. This is about the time we spend in Salah, isn't it? On a daily basis. Researchers found that the group that practiced spiritual meditation showed greater decreases in anxiety and stress and more positive mood. They also tolerated pain almost twice as long when asked to put their hand in an ice water bath. But not all prayer is equal, experts say. Another study in 2004 on religious coping methods found that people who approached God as a partner or collaborator in their life had better mental and physical health outcomes. Subhanallah. Again, we find this most aptly reflected in the verse, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَتَطْمَئِنَّ قُلُوبُهُمْ بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ. Those who have faith and whose hearts find rest in the remembrance of Allah. Truly, it is in the remembrance of God that hearts find peace. Dua and remembrance of God has like an instantaneous effect of calming. It gives a sense of a higher authority that you are connecting with capacity. It is like going to a mother's lap. You may recall, those of you who have done this, whatever difficulties or stresses that have been on you, you just go in the presence of your mother or her lap, and it is as if they are lifted. Your back becomes straight again after having been bent. Or a father's embrace. Or a sibling's shoulder. This is the effect that dua has. But a father, mother, sibling, brother, sister may not always be available. I remember speaking to a young man, who had lost his father. And sometime after, I spoke with him and I said, how are you managing, my dear brother? How are you coping? And he said something that really struck me. He said, it's hard, but I keep a tasbih in my pocket. Whenever I find things difficult and my heart feels constricted, I take out the tasbih and remember Allah and begin chanting His names. And my grief lifts and feels lighter. For indeed, as the verse says, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَ مَا كُنْتُمْ, and He is with you wherever you are. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He blesses us both with patience, gratitude, and His remembrance in every state. We pray that He bestows us with well-being in every sense, in our affairs of the religion, of the life in this world, and of the hereafter. Allahumma nas'aluka al-afiyata fi ad-dini wa dunya wal-akhirah. Ameen, Rabbal Alameen. Can we recite the Surah Fatiha for those dear members and brothers who we have lost recently, for all the marhumin, for all the marid. Al-Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen, Muhammadin al-Mustafa wa ala aliyin al-Murtada wa ala Fatimat al-Zahra wa ala al-Hasan wal-Husayn sayyiday shababi ahli al-Jannah وعلى علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر